All right, let's dive in. Today we're tackling something pretty interesting, the link between infidelity and what people do for a living.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder, right? Like, can your job actually make you more likely to cheat?
We've got 3 articles we're going to break down. One from Yahoo Finance Australia, one from Business Insider, and one from The Sun.
They all look at which jobs seem to have the most cheating going on.
So get ready. This is going to be a wild ride through, like, human nature and what goes on at work.
It really makes you question the idea that cheating is just like a personal choice, you know?
Totally. What if it's actually influenced by, like, the environment you work in?
Right.
Okay, The Sun had this stat that totally blew my mind.
Right.
85% of affairs start at work,
Whoa.
and 1 in 5 employees admitted to hooking up with a coworker.
Those are some serious numbers.
Yeah, hard to ignore those.
It makes sense, though, when you think about it. Like, we spend so much time at work building relationships, sharing experiences.
Is it true?
It's practically a breeding ground for intimacy, whether you intend it or not.
Work becomes its own little world with its own rules and pressures and everything.
Exactly.
And all 3 articles, they kind of point to the same professions as being like the top cheaters.
Oh, yeah.
Sales, education, and healthcare are always up there.
It's interesting when you consider each field, you know?
Yeah.
Like sales, it's all about networking and socializing. Client dinners, conferences, late nights out.
It's easy to blur the lines between work and personal stuff.
Totally. And there's that pressure to perform, big rewards, you know?
Creates a risk-taking mindset that maybe spills over into their personal life.
It could. It made me think, when you mention risk-taking, do certain personality types just like gravitate towards certain jobs?
Ooh, good point.
Do you think people who are drawn to like fast-paced, high-stakes careers
Yeah.
are also more likely to be impulsive in their personal lives?
That's a really interesting thought. It makes me wonder if there's, like, research on that. Is there a connection?
There totally is.
Yeah.
Studies have actually shown a link between personality traits like sensation-seeking and impulsivity,
Okay.
and a higher chance of doing risky things, including cheating.
Makes sense.
So yeah, it's possible that the same things that make someone successful in a high-pressure job
Yeah.
might also make them more likely to cheat.
Wow, that's fascinating. So it's like there's this underlying connection between, like, professional success
Mm-hmm.
and the choices you make in your personal life.
Exactly. But we got to remember, we're not saying everyone in these jobs cheats, of course.
Of course not.
It's more about understanding the potential risks, not judging people.
Right, right. Still makes me rethink some of my career goals, though, I gotta say.
Yeah.
So we've got the thrill-seeking salesperson.
Yeah.
But then there's education. That one kind of threw me off, honestly.
Yeah, you wouldn't think teachers would be high up on the infidelity list.
Right.
But think about it. Long hours, working closely together, and the interactions can get really emotional.
That's true.
Dealing with students' problems, parents, all the administrative stuff,
It's a lot to juggle.
it can put a strain on their personal relationships.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, they're pouring so much of themselves into work.
Right.
There's not much left for their partner. Plus, they're surrounded by others in the same boat.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that sense of, like, understanding and, well, opportunity.
Exactly. And don't forget, schools have a pretty social atmosphere, too.
Oh, yeah.
Staff meetings, after-school events, parent-teacher nights.
Easy to blur those lines.
It is.
Makes you wonder if teachers, like, are more aware of the risks, you know?
I think they probably are. They're usually pretty tuned in to interpersonal dynamics and boundaries from dealing with those in the classroom.
Right. So they might be quicker to pick up on warning signs in their own relationships.
They might be.
That's a good point. It's like they're trained to spot those red flags,
Right.
even if they can't always avoid them. Then there's healthcare,
Yeah.
which I guess isn't too surprising given how emotionally intense that work is.
Right. Dealing with life and death, suffering, ethical dilemmas.
Yeah.
It's a high-stress environment. Can lead to compassion fatigue, burnout.
And you can feel disconnected from your personal life.
Absolutely. Plus, they often work long, irregular hours.
That's tough on any relationship.
It is. And there's lots of close interaction with colleagues, especially in hospitals.
Yeah, where teams are working together under pressure.
Exactly. That shared intensity, the whole we're in this together feeling.
Creates a strong bond.
It does. And sometimes it crosses the line.
Happens. Plus, healthcare professionals are often really caring people,
They are. They're used to putting others first.
which could make them more vulnerable to.
Emotional manipulation.
Yeah, or just not prioritizing their own needs in a relationship.
Possibly.
So we've got sales with its risk-taking and blurred lines, education with its emotional intensity and close relationships,
Right.
and healthcare with all the stress and compassion fatigue. It's a pretty clear picture of how certain jobs can.
Well, Turvwell,
Yeah,
create the perfect conditions for infidelity.
it is.
What are your thoughts so far? Does any of this resonate with, like, your own experiences or what you've seen?
It definitely gives us a lot to think about.
Yeah.
And before we move on to some other surprising professions that came up,
Good.
I think it's worth really considering those risk factors we've identified.
Yeah.
Because even if you're not in one of these high-risk fields, these insights can help us understand relationships in any workplace.
Definitely. And you know what? I'm super curious about what companies are doing about all this.
Yeah.
Are they just ignoring it, or are they starting to realize how much workplace relationships, especially the messy ones,
Yeah.
can impact everything? Productivity, morale, even their public image.
Ooh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
We'll have to dive into that in the next part of our deep dive.
Definitely. Stay tuned. So welcome back to our deep dive. Last time we were digging into how certain jobs can kind of set the stage for infidelity, you know?
Right. Like all those long hours, the close teamwork, the emotional roller coaster.
Exactly. But what about the companies themselves? Are they, like, doing anything about it?
It makes you wonder, huh? Are they turning a blind eye? Or are they starting to see that workplace relationships, especially when they go south,
Oh, yeah.
can really mess things up, like productivity, morale, even their reputation?
It's a tough spot for companies, isn't it?
Yeah.
They want to respect people's personal lives and not be all up in their business, but
Right.
they also have to create a work environment that's safe and professional for everyone.
It's a balancing act for sure.
Totally. Like, too much intervention and they're the bad guys.
Right. Big brother watching everything.
Exactly. But too little, and they risk lawsuits, scandals.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that. But I do think things are changing, you know?
Really?
Yeah, companies are starting to realize they can't just ignore these relationships.
Makes sense.
More and more are putting policies in place, specifically about relationships between employees,
Interesting.
especially when there's, like, a power imbalance.
So, like, no more boss-employee romances. Is that even possible?
Not necessarily banning them outright,
Okay.
but definitely putting some safeguards in place.
Makes sense.
Some companies require you to disclose the relationship, especially if one person reports to the other.
Oh, okay.
Others do conflict of interest checks or make you report it to HR.
So it's all about transparency then.
Pretty much, making sure everything's out in the open and any potential conflicts are addressed up front.
I see.
It's not about controlling people's personal lives, you know.
Right.
It's about protecting the company and its employees from legal trouble, harassment claims,
Right.
even just the drama and gossip that can, like, poison the workplace.
Makes sense. But, I mean, do these policies really work?
Good question. Can you really legislate matters of the heart? It's hard to say for sure. I think it depends on how they're actually implemented and enforced, you know.
Yeah.
A clear, well-communicated policy that focuses on ethical behavior. That's probably more effective than one that feels, like, super restrictive or punishing.
Yeah. It seems like the key is finding that sweet spot.
It is.
Respecting people's freedom, but also protecting the company.
Exactly. But even with the best policies, you can't control what people do.
Right. So let's shift gears a bit and get into, like, the psychology behind infidelity.
Okay.
What actually drives someone to cheat, especially at work?
It's rarely simple, you know? Like, there's no single cheating personality or one trigger that sets everyone off.
Okay.
But psychologists have found some common threads, some patterns that can help us understand why people cheat no matter where it happens.
Interesting. So break it down for us. What are some of the psychological factors at play?
Well, one of the most common is, like, unmet needs in the main relationship. This could be a lack of emotional connection, feeling taken for granted, or maybe a mismatch in, like, sexual desire.
So if those needs aren't being met at home,
Yeah,
someone might be more likely to look for them somewhere else.
exactly. And the workplace can be tempting. You're around people who get you, who share your interests and challenges,
True.
working towards the same goals, celebrating wins together, supporting each other through tough times.
It's easy to see how those connections could,
Cross the line.
yeah. Especially in those high-pressure environments we talked about earlier, the workplace turns into this, like, pressure cooker of emotions.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes they just explode.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And then there's opportunity. We talked about how some jobs have more chances for close interactions.
Right.
But opportunity alone doesn't explain cheating.
It doesn't. Someone has to be willing to actually act on those opportunities.
Right. And that's where the psychology gets really fascinating.
It does. So what pushes someone over that edge? Is it just attraction, or is there something deeper going on?
It's usually a mix of things. Sometimes it's about seeking validation, a boost to their ego,
Okay,
feeling wanted after feeling neglected in their main relationship.
makes sense.
For others, it's about escaping the routine of their personal life,
Yeah.
looking for excitement, something new.
It's almost like self-sabotage, isn't
It
it?
can be risking everything for a fleeting moment of pleasure or validation.
Crazy.
And sometimes it might be a way to end a relationship that's not working. Subconsciously, of course.
Oh, wow. That's deep.
It is. Instead of facing the issues head on,
Yeah.
they create a situation that forces the issue.
So they're basically creating a crisis to get to some kind of resolution, even if it's painful.
Exactly. And then there's impulsivity, which we talked about earlier. Some
Yeah.
people are just wired to act on their desires without thinking about the consequences.
That in-the-moment thinking, right, where the immediate gratification outweighs the potential pain down the road.
Exactly. And the workplace, especially those high-stress, fast-paced ones,
Yeah.
can really fuel that impulsivity. You're constantly under pressure, making quick decisions,
Yeah.
surrounded by temptation. It's tough to resist.
It's a recipe for disaster, really.
Yeah.
But we have to remember, we're not just talking about abstract psychological concepts here.
We're not.
These choices have real consequences for real people.
They do. And
Yeah.
often the emotional fallout is way worse than anyone expects.
Yeah.
Broken trust, heartbreak, damaged reputations,
Yeah.
even legal battles. It's a high price to pay.
It's like a domino effect, right? The
Yeah.
impact goes beyond the two people involved.
Totally. It can affect families, friendships, even the whole work community.
So true.
It can create this toxic environment, breed resentment and suspicion,
Yeah.
and just erode that sense of trust that's so important for a healthy workplace.
Okay, so we've covered the psychology behind infidelity, how companies are responding, and the potential fallout. But sometimes the best way to really grasp something complex is to see how it plays out in real life.
I agree. Stories can bring those abstract ideas to life.
Right. They show us the human side of this topic that people often avoid talking about.
They do.
So for the final part of our deep dive, we're going to look at some real stories of workplace infidelity.
Ooh, interesting.
We'll explore the messiness, the complications, and sometimes even the surprising outcomes. Stay tuned.
Okay, so we've explored why workplace infidelity happens, the jobs that kind of breed it, the psychology behind it, the mess it creates. Now, let's get into the how. Like, how does this actually play out? We're
Okay.
going to look at some real-life stories that show just how messy and unpredictable these situations can be.
Stories are a great way to do that. They take
Yeah.
these ideas and make them real. Show us how choices actually affect people.
Exactly. And speaking of consequences, the first story that really grabbed me goes
Yeah.
back to that Ashley Madison data we talked about.
Remember how entrepreneurs were, like, way up there on the infidelity scale?
Oh, yeah, those risk takers,
So-
always pushing the limits. What happened?
Well, I found this article about a tech startup founder who got caught having an affair with, wait for it,
Okay.
his chief marketing officer.
Oh, wow. Talk about blurred lines.
Right. Long hours, shared passion for the company, that pressure cooker environment.
It's almost like a cliche, isn't it?
It is. But here's the twist. You'd think a scandal like that would totally destroy the company.
You would.
But it didn't.
Really?
The founder's marriage ended, yeah. But the company actually survived.
How do they manage that? That kind of public drama can be a killer, especially for a tech company.
From what I read, they brought in some outside help to deal with the crisis.
Smart move.
They restructured their leadership team a bit to create some distance, and they just, like, hunkered down and focused on work.
It's a good lesson,
Was that
Even when your personal life is a mess, focusing on something bigger than yourself can really help.
I see what you mean. And maybe it says something about startup culture, too.
How so?
Like, they're used to pivoting, adapting, overcoming obstacles.
That's a good point. Maybe those same qualities that make them prone to risk-taking also make them better at handling the fallout.
Interesting. All right, story number 2 takes us to a totally different world, academia.
Ah, yes. The ivory tower. Full of intrigue.
We talked about how those long hours and intense collaborations in universities can lead to romance, right?
Right. Late nights in the library, passionate debates. Sparks can fly.
This story's about 2 professors co-writing a book,
Okay.
and they fell head over heels for each other.
Oh.
Problem was, they were both married to other people.
Oh, wow. The forbidden love triangle. Classic.
What happened? Did they give in?
Wow.
They did.
Yeah.
Ended up leaving their spouses and starting a new life together.
Big decision.
Huge scandal on campus, of course.
I bet.
But they seem determined to make it work. And years later,
Yeah.
they're still together, still teaching, still writing.
Huh. It makes you think about all those judgments we make about right and wrong.
Yeah.
Life's rarely so black and white. Sometimes those messy, unconventional paths lead to real happiness.
I agree. And this story reminds us that cheating isn't always about being mean or not loving your partner.
Right.
Sometimes it's about finding a connection so strong.
Yeah.
It makes you question everything you thought you knew about yourself and your life.
It's a powerful reminder that we're all pretty complex, driven by a mix of conscious choices and subconscious desires.
Totally.
And sometimes those desires take us down paths we never expected.
Okay, ready for story number 3.
Hit me.
This one's a bit of a cautionary tale,
Mm-hmm.
and unfortunately, pretty common.
Okay, I have a bad feeling about this.
It involves a high-powered executive, the kind who just oozes charisma,
Mm-hmm.
thinks he's untouchable.
I know the type.
Well, turns out he was having a bunch of affairs with his subordinates.
Ugh, the classic abuse of power.
Mhm.
Sadly, we hear about that a lot.
It all blew up when one of the women he was involved with filed a sexual harassment lawsuit.
Oh, wow.
Became a huge media circus. His reputation was ruined. He lost everything, his job, his family, his standing in the community.
Oof, that's rough.
It's a harsh reminder that actions have consequences, right?
They do.
And those consequences are way worse when there's a power imbalance involved.
You can't just use your position to take advantage of people and think you'll get away with it.
Exactly. And the damage isn't just to the individual.
Right.
It breaks down trust in leadership, creates a toxic work environment,
Mm-hmm.
and can even hurt the company's reputation
Mm-hmm.
and bottom line.
So we've got 3 very different stories. One where things turned out okay, one about unconventional love, and one about power corrupting everything.
Mm.
What do you think we can take away from all of this?
I think they show us that infidelity isn't a simple thing.
Right.
There's no one story, no predictable ending. The reasons are complicated, the consequences can be huge, and the road to healing or making things right
Mm.
is rarely easy.
And they highlight how important communication is,
Totally.
Being open and honest, holding ourselves accountable.
In the stories where things went really bad,
Yeah.
it was often because those things were missing.
That's a really good point. Being honest with your partner about what you need, setting boundaries at work,
Yeah.
creating a workplace where people can talk openly.
Yeah.
Those all seem key to navigating this whole messy situation.
Absolutely. And I think these stories also challenge us to go beyond just judging people,
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Infidelity is complicated. It touches on some deep parts of human nature: desire, ambition, loneliness.
Right. That longing for connection.
Exactly.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of workplace infidelity,
Yeah.
we want to leave you with a question. How can we create work environments that are not only successful and innovative,
Hmm.
but also encourage healthy relationships and ethical behavior?
It's a great question. And maybe by understanding why people do what they do and the systems that contribute to infidelity, we
Yeah,
can start to build more conscious, compassionate, and fair workplaces.
places where everyone can thrive, both personally and professionally. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those critical thinking caps on.